Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing to you Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones for the Game Boy Advance. With Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes right around the corner as of the time of this recording, and I also have reviewed every other Fire Emblem game to appear on a Nintendo system except for that terrible Shadow Dragon port in 2020, I thought let's round it up, get people to get on that Wii U eShop before it's too late if you can't find a GBA cartridge. At first glance, Sacred Stones seems like it's just a palette swap of the original Fire Emblem on Game Boy Advance, and that's to a certain extent true, as this game reuses almost all of the graphical assets, almost all of the battle animations, and even though most of the music is remixed or brand new compositions, it still very much feels like the same old, same old. However, these games are actually very different in that they take place on totally different continents with their own rule sets, and Sacred Stones also has a handful of tweaks to make it slightly more user-friendly than the original Fire Emblem was. So if you've watched my review of Fire Emblem on Game Boy Advance, also known as Blazing Blade in Japan, a lot of those pointers still apply here. It's still a turn-based strategy game where you take turns moving your units on a grid, and then you'll see what's called the combat forecast window that tells you how much damage you'll do, what percentage you have of hitting the enemy, and how much critical hit percent you have, as well as showing the enemy's equivalents. But the catch is that if a unit dies, that unit is dead for good, and unless you either reset the game or abuse the save points in the Wii U Virtual Console version, that unit is gone for good. And each unit has their own individual personality, and they can also gain support conversations with other units. So it's often a priority to keep your units alive, not just because you're losing an asset to the army, but because you're potentially losing a really good friend. A couple of additions that this game made over the original Fire Emblem, and to a certain extent the newer Fire Emblems are still trying to keep up with this, is now there are 3 difficulty modes instead of just 2. In the original, there was normal and hard. Now there's easy, normal, and hard. The biggest difference between easy and normal is that easy mode gives you a tutorial, whereas normal just boots you right into the game. So if you're unfamiliar with any other Fire Emblem game, you might want to go on easy, because the game will literally handhold you through the tutorial and force you to hear the hints and do exactly what it says in the first couple of levels. Not only that, but there are also 2 training dungeons that open up over the course of the game, which you can use over and over again to build up your unit levels. In addition to that, there's a world map where you can go to various shops and armories across the whole continent if you can't find them on the world map. And in addition to that, sometimes monsters will roam the overworld, and if you land on one of their spaces, then you can start another training battle to grind even more experience. So in case you haven't noticed, Sacred Stones is very heavy on really maximizing your units' levels instead of just plowing from one mission to the other. This comes with pros and cons. On one hand, I think it's great for less experienced players to be able to grind their way through the tougher levels. But on the other hand, the weapon durability system makes it so that it's kind of a risk-reward system. Since you only have so many uses for your weapons and staves, you have to really prioritize if you want to try to go through those training missions and put wear and tear on your valuable weapons, or if you think you're just good enough and you want to just get through the levels. Now, there are a few units that pretty much require you to do these training dungeons, as this game introduces 3 units that I like to call underclassed units. Basically, they start out even lower than a typical lower class, and then after that unit gets to level 10, he or she will be able to get to the base class, and then you can upgrade the unit again to reach the 2nd class, which I guess you could say is a precursor to Radiant Dawn's 3rd classing, as these units turn out to be some of the best units in the entire game, even though they start out as some of the worst. In addition to that version of upgrading, Sacred Stones adds a couple of new classes that you can upgrade to, as well as a skill system for some of them, such as assassins being able to lethally strike an enemy in one hit. You can also choose between two variations of a class, so a thief could be an assassin or a rogue instead of having a predetermined outcome. Now, the original Fire Emblem was known for having 3 different quests. You had Lynn's quest, which was basically the tutorial, and then either Ellawood's or Hector's to fill out the story, with only very mild differences between the two. This game is sorta better, but also sorta worse than that system. You're in control of 2 twins named Erica and Ephraim. You start out the game by playing from Erica's perspective. Then you get 1 level from Ephraim's, switch back to Erica, then they eventually reunite. But then you're told which one of them are you going to follow on their respective quests, because they're told that they need to accomplish 2 different missions. So in that sense, it adds a lot of replay value, as you can go through either one of the twins' routes and experience different parts of the story. The problem with that is that the twins will reunite again, and then the story proceeds pretty much as normal, apart from a few dialogue changes near the end. So even if you replay the game, there's still a huge chunk of missions that you're going to replay no matter what. Nevertheless, at least it's some replay value. I think it probably could have been handled a little bit better, but one thing that was handled incredibly well was this game's story. It starts out relatively simple, but gradually ramps up the stakes so that it feels like an epic war across all of the continents, and there's definitely some, oh no, what's gonna happen next, type of moments that really do a great job of building up the suspense. I think one thing Sacred Stones doesn't get enough credit for is its very sympathetic villains. Obviously you have some tropes of, mwahaha, I just want to destroy everything because I'm an evil overlord, but there are just as many villains where you kind of feel sorry for them. You begin to wonder, were they put into a lousy situation and ended up with a bad outcome just because they're not of the same mindset as you? And so it really gives a lot of shades of gray to a lot of their perspectives. It really makes you wonder, did they deserve this? Overall, the tactics-based gameplay is still just as great as it's ever been. Obviously, it can't compete with the later Fire Emblem games with further refinements, but this is still a fantastic game. Only 8 games in Japan, and this game has already mastered pretty much everything that's made Fire Emblem great. Sure, the supports might not be as memorable or as easy to get to. It might not have the sweeping orchestral score or the wonderful voice acting of Three Houses, but it does a great job for being phenomenal for the Game Boy Advance hardware. In fact, half of the time I wondered, how the heck is this good of music coming out of this tiny little machine? With the multiple difficulty levels, the world map, the grinding towers, and lots of ways to make this more accessible, I definitely recommend this, especially if it's your first Fire Emblem game, as this game takes place in its own universe with its own characters and has yet to have a sequel or a prequel, so it can totally be a standalone experience. You do not need any knowledge of the other Fire Emblem games. And even if you don't know how the mechanics work, you can still set your difficulty to easy if you want the game to slowly walk you through the various elements of the gameplay. So I highly recommend you get this game any way you can, either on Game Boy Advance or Wii U Virtual Console. Neither version is going to disappoint you. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything I missed, and if you have any questions or comments or critiques. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!